Well, I lied a little bit. I wouldn't even know how to instruct someone on how to learn how to follow your instincts. By the way, Mark Kulak, Houstonic.live, HOUSATONIC.LIVE, Mark Kulak, KULACZ, broadcasting out of a corner of a bedroom up in the northeastern part of the United States, half an hour outside of Boston. I am a analyst, former engineer, product marketing director, was in the tech industry. Now I do this. I'm enthusiastic about analyzing, researching, educating, archiving. I'm not enthusiastic about doing this as far as, I'd be happy if other people wanted to do this, if they had a way to get paid, but no one else is doing this, and it needs to get done. And, of course, it was the under recognition of the drug epidemic, fatal drug overdose epidemic in the United States, above and beyond anything else, that compelled me to try to figure out what the heck was going on and why are some things not being spoken about. Great program today from Jonathan Cooey, Giga-Ohm Biological. Hello, Taz. Good to have you here. And he reminded everyone of observing prioritization. Are people tackling problems in an order of priority, in a objective way, as best as possible? Of course, true objectivism is very difficult, of course, but is it somewhat objective? And one way that you can identify if the talk of the day makes any sense and if people are sincere is analyzing their prioritization. So, the base statement, children are the most important thing to defend and protect and secure and support. Everyone agrees. 100%, pretty much 100% of the people will agree with that completely or mostly. So the statements that Jeffrey Epstein needs to be so visible right now because of the alleged potential crimes. And there's more to proving a crime for real in a court than someone saying, yeah, I like this in an email. That's not proof of anything. That's just an email. That's not actually proof of anything. But those emails and those crimes, whatever they were, are 10, 20, 25 years ago right now, if they happened at all, or more. And if we have to stop everything, news of the day, concern of the day is children who are being abused sexually, well then, right now, we have a massive drug epidemic in the United States, which is the leading cause of underage people being involved in prostitution. The number one cause. So, if the concern is children, then with Epstein being the top of the charts is proof that they are not following their own guidance. They're already off. Because that would be the priority. If that's what they say they're being motivated by, to protect the children, well, then it's not Epstein. What's next? Why don't we look at who the King of England had sex with 500 years ago? When does it end? What matters is now. And if it's not now, then it already happened. What's happening now? And what's happening now should be the top of the stack. And as far as I know, Jeffrey Epstein has been dead for 7+ years. He's not here anymore. There's no one to protect anymore. So, I get frustrated. But anyways, I'm puzzled because I want to understand why Epstein. And when I was watching the interview of Jeffrey Epstein that was suggested to be done before he died by Steve Bannon, and I believe Steve Bannon is actually interviewing him, but there's no way to prove definitively, based upon the evidence that's been released, that that interview was recorded before Jeffrey Epstein's death. Now, of course, if Jeffrey Epstein actually did die, then it would have to have been before then. However, if Jeffrey Epstein isn't dead, then it's totally possible that that interview could have been done after Jeffrey Epstein's death. We don't know. I haven't seen any timestamps. But anyways, and I posted that interview. I posted that interview for all of you to see, and I'm sure 1,000 other people have reposted that interview as well. Here is the Guardian article. of Steve Bannon talking to Jeffrey Epstein. Remember, this was done in, if everything's above board, July of 2019. And then on August 4th of 2019, Steve Bannon went to the U.S.-Mexican border, had a very expensive, completely unnecessary interview with Candace Owens on the border. Of course, Candace Owens got lifted up by Breitbart magazine, managed by Steve Bannon. And then it was 3 or 4 days after that interview that Jeffrey Epstein technically died, or at least officially has died. From that interview, there was reminders that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in 2008, at some time after his arrest in 2008, where I think he pled guilty to relations with a minor. So he's in jail. He's in an 18-month sentence or something like that. And then in 2008, there was the market meltdown, United States financial market meltdown from investing firms. It included, in particular, Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, both of which no longer exist. The remnants of both were bought out, but most of the people were laid off. They went bankrupt. Some assets were repurchased. And it's understood that those bankruptcies were driven by subprime mortgage loans. Is everyone following this so far? Hello, Tazik. Hello, Snow. Christy, you following this one so far? I think what you're going to see in the next hour, I think I've unraveled what Jeffrey Epstein is about. And it's going to go straight back to Joshua Lederberg and the Human Genome Project. It's likely that Jeffrey Epstein did like young women. Believe it or not, there's actually more than 3 or 4 guys in the United States that like to date and marry younger women. I think it's a pretty well-established fact worldwide. Not children, but younger. And I think that what you see, like in all of these yearbooks that were made, were really people taunting him. You know, if you've ever had an uncle that, you know, maybe was 50 years old and got divorced and married a 40-year-old, got divorced 10 years later, married another 30, people would taunt. And it would be like a way of ribbing somebody. And I think when you're seeing in those emails, okay, is really people taunting Jeffrey Epstein about this. They're not celebrating the fact that he's with children. But in this interview, Jeffrey Epstein talks about how he's in jail and he's on the phone with one of the senior directors or the president of Bear Stearns, or previously at Bear Stearns, and then other phone, somebody related to Lehman Brothers. And he made a lot of money, supposedly, working with Bear Stearns in the 1980s. He was with Bear Stearns, I think, in the early 1980s. He never worked for Lehman Brothers, but Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns were the two main companies that had meltdowns in 2008 because of the subprime mortgage thing. In other words, they were basically printing money by using collateral from mortgages and then lending it out over and over and over again. They were printing massive, massive quantities of money and then lending it out. That's what they were doing, these firms, and then everyone was turning the other way while it was happening. And I think the movie in 2011 called Margin Call might be a movie that should be on your to-do list. Of course, it is the official Hollywood narrative about what happened in 2008, but it is. I think it's meant to capture it, and so that people, like, this is what you're supposed to think. And the main character in the movie, of course, is Kevin Spacey, who is a friend and associate of some sort of Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, so here we are, 2008, and we have that meltdown, and Epstein is showing that he understands the liquidity problem, and he understands the subprime mortgage problem in this interview. I think he may not understand it better than anyone in the world, but he definitely seems to present it in a simple enough way for a fair number of people to grasp it, so that's fine. He establishes that. The second thing in the interview that comes out earlier on is that Jeffrey Epstein, in this interview, and by the way, this is episode 1467, I think, Jeffrey Epstein says that he made a lot of contacts with the Rockefeller Institute. great to have you here, V. I'm so happy you're here. And I'll restart this in a minute or two because I think this stuff's important. I think I understand what Jeffrey Epstein is all about. I really do. It just sort of came to me today, and I'm glad something was nagging at me. Jeffrey Epstein said that he got this big opportunity meeting Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, and eventually sitting on the board of the Rockefeller Institute. Rockefeller Institute, of course, is involved in a wide range of research and other investments. Now, he wasn't clear on exactly when he met John D. Rockefeller. He kind of suggested late 1980s. We know that he wasn't officially on the board of the Rockefeller Institute until well into the 1990s. But I believe he was involved in quite a few meetings and maybe board meetings even before then. All right? You up with me so far? You're there. Hopefully you're still there. So, Jeffrey Epstein, Rockefeller Institute, John D. Rockefeller, sometime 1980s, 1990s. Second part, Jeffrey Epstein, he worked with Bear Stearns for a while. He was never with Lehman, but the problem with Lehman is exactly the same as the one at Bear Stearns. Okay, so there we are. And now we have, so let's just review. We have Rockefeller Institute, 1, 2, Bear Stearns, Lehman, 2008 market meltdown. Let me get a pen that works, guys. Trust me, it's worth it. Hang in there. Hang in there. We're doing the real work. We're breaking it down. 1, Rockefeller Institute. 2, Bear Stearns, Lehman, 2008 subprime. Bullet point 3 did not come from this interview. Bullet point 3 came from the brother of Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein. And again, I'm going to have to swap around a little bit because they do something really annoying. The pop-up ad on the screen is absolutely terrible here. This is from July 15th of 2015. Here, Eric Weinstein is having an interview with Singh Ju. Please don't even tell me that's Indian. No, he's talking to Stephen Bartlett. I don't know who that is. Maybe I should know. And in here, Eric Weinstein is talking about the intelligence community's war on its own people. As it goes on, Eric Weinstein says, at a minimum, we're faking. And I'm sorry, I'm taking this in the middle of this transcribed conversation here. I guess he's talking about intelligence community, secret whatever, UFO program. Stephen Bartlett says, do you think you're under attack? Eric Weinstein says, let me talk about Leo Szilard instead. Leo Szilard, that's Szilard. Leo Szilard is the father of and then Stephen Bartlett says, the Manhattan Project, which is where the nuclear bomb was created. Eric Weinstein responds, that's right. He was not allowed to go inside the Manhattan Project because they didn't trust him. He was a genius. He was the idea for the Manhattan Project. He and Einstein made sure that it happened, meaning the Manhattan Project happened. The government barely trusted Oppenheimer if you saw the film. What they did with Leo Szilard was they minded him. They knew how good he was. They knew how important he was. They listened to him. They didn't destroy him. He undoubtedly knew that the program was going on, but he wasn't allowed to step inside the program. And later on, it says Eric Weinstein. Eric Weinstein says, if you look at, for example, Jeffrey Epstein conducted a conference called, quote, Confronting Gravity, unquote. I don't know who Jeffrey Epstein was, but I certainly bet money that he was a product of at least one or more elements of the intelligence community, the CIA, the FBI. Those are ours. Department of Homeland Security has some stuff. Geospatial intelligence has some of this. It's a large network. Eric Weinstein continues to say, I'm talking about people like David Grush. I'm talking about people potentially like David Fravor. I don't know who that is. I'm talking about people like Jake Barber. I'm talking about scientists like Leo Szilard. Imagine if Leo Szilard didn't know that the Manhattan Project was going on, or Jack Rapper, a journalist who broke the story. These are the people that think that they're doing. I desperately want to know why Jeffrey Epstein knew so much about my work, and I want to know why he was connected to my graduate program, blah, 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 blah. So, of course, Jeffrey Epstein does not know Leo Szilard. But the point here is that Leo Szilard comes up, and the network around Leo Szilard comes up when talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Leo Szilard, the father of the atomic bomb. Okay. Now, much of the work that Jeffrey Epstein does involves, investments. There's a lot was involving genetics, computing, virology, small nuclear reactors, and I'm sure there were other businesses as well, media. And artificial intelligence, and AI is a very broad collection of computing, energy, chip technology, physics, etc., as well as whatever the particular application would be. Could be genetics, immunology, pharma, something like that. Okay, so bringing all this together here, let's go back up to number one. The Rockefeller Institute. Who was the president of the Rockefeller Institute between 1978 and 1990? Who was the president of the Rockefeller Institute from 1978 to 1990? If Jeffrey Epstein met John D. Rockefeller between 1985 and 1990, Christy has it right in the chat. I'm going to read in a second. Then he absolutely, positively would know the head of the Rockefeller Institute. If Jeffrey Epstein was on the board of the Rockefeller Institute at some time after 1990, he definitely would know who the president of the Rockefeller Institute was from 1978 to 1990. If Jeffrey Epstein was friends with John D. Rockefeller and other people on the board of the Rockefeller Institute at any time before 2008, by the way, look at the time that Joshua LEDERBERG died, he would have known Joshua LEDERBERG. So the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Joshua LEDERBERG is all but certain to have existed, and it is not documented anywhere. And oftentimes, the absence of something being documented that is so plain as day, obvious, and undeniable to be real is evidence that it's valuable. When you look up something like, hey, who was the father of Robert Mueller III, the head of the FBI, and it doesn't say anywhere. It just doesn't say anywhere. It's like it's buried. And then you notice all references to that person, even though they had a fair amount of money, are removed from everywhere. It's obvious that somebody took the time to do some sort of soft scrub. It's obvious. The absence of what should be easy to find data is proof that it's valuable, which means that even though you won't be able to find all of it, you already know that everything you find is valuable. Which is one of the reasons why I've encouraged people in the intelligence community. If you're trying to hide shit, don't hide it. If I were to look up the father of Robert Swan Mueller III, and if I were to find 5,000 newspaper articles about him, and if I knew where he lived and I knew his net worth, I, believe it or not, immediately would have been less skeptical about who he was. The fact that you can't delete everything, you're always going to leave a trace of something, and it's obvious to me that you did that, is proof that it's valuable. So even though I don't have all the information I want to have, you told me it's important. If I had all the information I wanted to have, I wouldn't know it was important. You see the difference? So your stupid desire to scrub shit over and over again tells me what's important. I'm trying to be the friend of my own enemy. I'm trying to tell you how to do your effing job. Stop deleting things. You tell me what's valuable every time you try to hide something. So with that said, the fact that it's obvious that Jeffrey Epstein... Now, this doesn't mean that Jeffrey Epstein and Joshua LEDERBERG are great friends. Not at all. Not at all. But what it does mean is that they're acquaintances professionally. If my largest client was John D. Rockefeller, and if I was getting business from the Rockefeller Institute, you bet your ass that I'm going to use every opportunity I have to get dinner with the president of the Rockefeller Institute, Joshua LEDERBERG. Even if I don't like him, even if I think he's a moron, even if I don't like the way he looks, I don't like his jokes, whatever. You know, it's business. It's just business. And if Jeffrey Epstein is half the businessman, and that some people say is, he would have done everything possible to spend time with LEDERBERG. And the fact that that relationship isn't documented anywhere is proof that it's real. It's even more proof that it's real, and it's proof that it's important. But that's just the start of it, okay? Because that's just the top. That's just the Rockefeller stuff. So, let's go to number 2. Let's go to this market meltdown, 2008 market meltdown, Bear Stearns Lehman. It matters because somebody used to be the vice president of Lehman Brothers for a long time. Christy's right, by the way, Joshua LEDERBERG. So, for almost 10 to 15 years, somebody was a vice president of Lehman Brothers. I know it's not the same as Bear Stearns, but this person, let me go down the list, okay? This person was 1, a vice president at Lehman Brothers. 2, he was the chief strategist of Lehman Brothers. 3, he was the chief strategist of FDR's New Deal. Oh, no, it's better than that, Shimmer. It's better than that, but that's a damn good guess. That's a damn good guess. That's what most channels wouldn't get that. So, but it gets better than that, okay? Because he was also a top-level security clearance. That's number 4. Number 5 is this person is a guy who just happened to take the letter called the Weinstein-Szilard letter regarding a suggestion to start the Manhattan Project, carry it to FDR, and get the Manhattan Project started. But that person is also the very same person who was the great uncle of Bill Barr. So let's repeat: one guy, okay. And if you're a Jew hater, which I'm not, we're all kind of corny. We all have to get along with our quirks and our strengths and our weaknesses. I feel bad for people that are just into hating these people or hating those people or whatever. But you know what? Every once in a while, that's kind of like my way of scorning you people that are into picking on this group or picking on that group. One person is the uncle of Donald Barr. He is the great uncle of Bill Barr. He delivered the Szilard-Einstein letter to FDR to get the Manhattan Project started. He was the chief economist of the New Deal. He was a vice president of Lehman. He was, for a long time, up until the time he died in 1974, a chief strategist at Lehman. And his, economic expansion ideas at Lehman and going all the way back to the New Deal have a resonance with what became subprime lending. And that person is named Alexander Sachs, S-A-C-H-S. He was knighted by the King of England, or Queen of England, several years ago. He died in the 1970s. And so, in other words, this guy also knew the very same Leo Szilard, which here Eric Weinstein, brother Brett Weinstein, is talking about as being some sort of model, if you will, of the construct of Jeffrey Epstein. Great question. Awesome question. You guys know so much. They're not related in any meaningful way. But excellent question. Not related to Jeffrey Sachs. But excellent question. You have a super great knowledge base. Good for you, garden variety human. Now, this also is crazy because, let me go to the other side of the screen here, okay? Because the uncle, I should say the nephew of this Alexander Sachs, Donald Barr, Alexander Sachs being the guy that delivered the Einstein Szilard letter to FDR, the guy who was a vice president for years at Lehman, who was the chief economist, was the first chief economist of FDR's New Deal, was a chief economist at Lehman for many years, had all kinds of ideas about economic expansion, which some say resonated with the policies of what became many years later, not technically subprime mortgages, but I mean that was something else altogether. But just lending from loans, mortgages in general. This Alexander Sachs, if that's with all that being true, with Alexander Sachs' nephew being Donald Barr, father of Bill Barr, that Donald Barr hired Jeffrey Epstein at the Dalton School in the 1970s. In other words, the uncle of the guy that first hired Jeffrey Epstein at the Dalton School is the very same person that delivered the Weinstein-Szilard letter to FDR to get the Manhattan Project going. Carrying this on further, was he a British citizen? He was. I don't believe he was born in the United States. I think it might have actually been Lithuania. But again, in the 1800s, when boats are coming from Lithuania, they're all coming through Britain, so they could have done a little bit of laundry work there. There's a lot of questions that remain about Alexander Sachs. In fact, I think what was the other one? So there's Lehman, and then there's Goldman Sachs. I have questions about the Goldman Sachs family having connections to Alexander Sachs, but because they made changes in the way Sachs would spell, sometimes it was S-A-X, sometimes S-A-C-K-S. There's not a lot of clarity on the records. There's never been a reason for me to get over my skis on that one. What's been underreported is already so abundant. What can be reported using mainstream sources and official government records, the pieces that can be put together are already so abundant, I've never had a reason to take it any further. It's already more than most people can swallow. Let's start tying some of these pieces together, okay? Because we know that Leo Szilard, and it's the Szilard-Einstein letter, Leo Szilard went to Wisconsin for a while, where he was, for a brief time, the mentor of Joshua LEDERBERG as well. We also know that one of the first big clients, money-wise, of Jeffrey Epstein is this Les Wexner. Everybody loves to talk about Les Wexner because Les Wexner and L Brands brought Victoria's Secrets. What a lot of people don't like to talk about is that the founder of Victoria's Secrets was actually a graduate out in Stanford, probably also a friend of Joshua LEDERBERG, and also someone that committed suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge at the end of the 1980s after he sold Victoria's Secrets to Les Wexner. But again, whatever. I suspect Joshua LEDERBERG is among the most important Americans to ever live. Whether he was the smartest, I don't know. I think he had a lot of ideas. I think he was frustrated with his level of understanding of some of his peers, such as Salvador Luria and Max Delbruck, at their understanding of phage biology, understanding the limits of how far they were going to get with genetics, how most of what they saw in the lab was simply just transfection and was it transcription and transfection, and they were seeing that the more comical people, the people that were willing to take actual science fiction and comic book ideas about what was potentially available with science fiction and run with it, got a lot of the visibility. You can see a lot of the bacteriologists, a lot of the phage biologists kind of just dropped out. Joshua LEDERBERG stayed in there and was an advisor to, 6, 7, 8 U.S. presidents, starting with Kennedy and going all the way to Bush, all the way up to September 11th, 2001. And is one of the most abundantly documented people in this book here, the Germs book, written by Judith Miller, that came out on Was published officially anyways, September 9th, 2001. One of the problems that you're going to have from a national security perspective is how do you fund all of these programs? Because as Lederberg's influence grew and his respect grew, he knew that there needed to be more billions thrown at microprocessors, more billions thrown at storing nuclear fuel for the long term, more money thrown at genetics, more money thrown at cancer than the U.S. government ever could have possibly dreamed of. It was, the military budget is big, but Lederberg, having been consulted with and pulled in all kinds of different directions, and definitely with the Rockefeller Institute, knew that you needed probably more money than there was in the entirety of the United States economy. Where are you going to get that money? How are you going to fund all that? And isn't it odd that ever since really the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, we have had absolutely nonsensical valuations and profits and money going into and coming out of tech companies. It just doesn't make any sense how much money goes in, how much money comes out, how many data centers they build, how many people they hire, how many benefits they throw at their employees. None of it makes any sense. None of it's really grounded in the real world. I was fortunate enough to have, 20-something year career at a tech company working at a pretty high level. But still, the work that I did, should it paid as well as it did? There's people who worked as hard as I did in trades, maybe even harder, maybe even suffered a disability that didn't make nearly as much. It doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense. I suspect that Jeffrey Epstein was one of perhaps many, we don't know how many there are, of people that are involved in working with leaders within this, let's just say the big agenda, the agenda of all agendas, the Human Genome Project, the taking control of the evolution of the human species. They need to work with money managers who can find piles of money and then can create more and more financial instruments to make more and more money available to the different technologies, to the different companies, than the U.S. government and even foreign investment could ever possibly throw at it. And I suspect that, Epstein was fairly rich. Epstein wasn't a billionaire, though. Wasn't a trillionaire. He was a middleman. He was a money guy. And I suspect that there may be more. Epstein may be ultimately maybe one of the most well-known ones because of his party antics, because of his relationship antics, okay? But I think this really goes that one of the reasons why you're not going to see Lederberg mentioned anywhere, or perhaps other people connected with Lederberg, Joshua Lederberg of the United States, whose connection to Jeffrey Epstein was probably somehow facilitated through the Rockefeller Institute. Lederberg did not know the Barr family directly, but Lederberg did know Alexander Sachs. That's a fact. Lederberg did know Leo Szilard. Lederberg did know Enrico Fermi. Lederberg did know Jonas Salk. Lederberg did know Craig Venter. Craig Venter and Jeffrey Epstein are associates as listed in Rockefeller Bank, or not the Rockefeller Research Institute. They are all. There was a book that came out in 2006 or 2007 that has excerpts from both multiple people that were on the board of this thinking group. I don't know. There's so many of these different organizations, which featured prominently both Jeffrey Epstein and Craig Venter. So you find the right Hollywood people that can help give things visibility. And one of the great things about working with Hollywood, working with Harvey Weinstein, having connections to music artists like Michael Jackson or actors like Kevin Spacey. Remember, Kevin Spacey was also in the movie Outbreak You know, the movie Outbreak where Kevin Spacey's suit gets punched, you know, where there's Ebola floating all over the place, is that you take the money from these super ultra high paid Hollywood actors and other movie directors, and you can invest it exactly in the companies and in the technologies that you know are going to boom based upon national security priorities. So you know you need money going into chip companies. You know you need money going into a maybe an Inovio or maybe a Moderna at this point, or maybe some plasmid company or whatever. Maybe it needs to go into Thermo Fisher over here. I mean, who knows what needs to go into Kodak? Not because people are buying cameras, but because of other optical technology. So you know where the money needs to go. You know what's going to happen. You know when the terrorist attacks are going to happen. You can guarantee higher returns than anyone else because you can take greater risks because you're already connected. The people that invest the money are going to get higher than average returns. They can take their even greater than expected returns. Now they have more money to give to the political candidates, which in turn are going to ensure that the agenda continues to go on exactly as planned. And Jeffrey Epstein plays a critical part in the middle of this. And while this is all happening, the Human Genome Project, advances in computing, AI, the vaulting of massive quantities of lightly spent nuclear fuels to power the data centers of the future. Everyone is talking about, oh my goodness, Jeffrey Epstein likes girls or some shit like that. Everyone's distracted about, yeah, okay. You mad about that? Well, you should be talking about the drug epidemic right now in the United States. And this is me targeting the people who are just hyper-focused and having a good time and a lot of laughs talking about the things that whatever are in these Epstein email dumps. There was a video that came out yesterday. It's on the channel WILLAURA, Willora. I don't know. Let's go to videos. And the video is titled Lies Equals Intellect. This is a video.
Do they send out random signals and eventually some of them live? Or is it
from 2006? Jeffrey Epstein is having a dinner with some knowledge, not Ray Kurzweil, but someone like a Ray Kurzweil, thought leaders in virology, in biology, in computing. They're talking about cell-to-cell communication. They're talking about phages. They're talking about receptor binding domains. They're talking about viruses. They don't say transfection.
Cells send out signals telling them to kill themselves. And, of course,
talking about how cancer cells work, not necessarily all accurately, but definitely in way more detail than most people typically would when they're talking about these types of things. At some point, they're talking about ribosomes that manufacture other ribosomes being manufactured out of proteins and protein folding. You know why Jeffrey Epstein is, moderately interested in this and has some level of education? It's because this is where he has been investing, probably, at least at this time, for 15 to 18 years with, I'm sure, on multiple occasions, guidance from people like Joshua LEDERBERG. You ever notice that no one mentions LEDERBERG? He doesn't exist. There's as much of a blackout on LEDERBERG right now as there is talking about India, matter of fact. In the U.S. media, you can't, as well as the actual accurate number of people who died of drug overdoses, as well as the fact that several 100,000 Americans were murdered using reckless use of supplemental oxygen during coronavirus to give people the symptoms of ARDS, which was then confused symptomatically with COVID, where they were then actually, where the murder was then blamed on the ventilator. But in reality, what got them on the ventilator was the begging for the ventilator, the acceptance of the ventilator because of the damage caused by the supplemental oxygen. Anyways, there's a blackout on LEDERBERG right now for a very specific reason. This Week in Virology won't even talk about Joshua LEDERBERG. They will talk about David Baltimore. And by the way, when Joshua LEDERBERG stepped down from the head of the Rockefeller Institute in 1990, the next person to fill the role was David Baltimore. And this is where Epstein has been. So is Epstein some type of a playboy? Yeah, probably. But you know what? We did not have several 100,000 Americans killed with supplemental oxygen because Jeffrey Epstein went out with a 17-year-old. We did not have 1 million Americans killed in the opioid epidemic because Jeffrey Epstein liked to go out with a 17-year-old. This is about prioritization. Is that nasty for some, wrinkly 55, 60-year-old guy at the time to do that? Yeah, it is kind of nasty. But it's about prioritization. As far as I can tell, Jeffrey Epstein hasn't killed anybody. I'm doing my program not because someone went out with a 17-year-old. Ha, ha, ha. I'm doing my program because we've had several 100,000, if not 1 million plus, murders in the United States of America. Real murders. Through a drug epidemic which goes unspoken about, which has cost parents, which has cost children, through all of the lives they've taken during COVID. That's why I'm here. And it's to the point where, look, right now, if you have to be honest. The several 100,000 deaths, it's not 1 million more in total during COVID from all of these additional causes, right now, are going to go unpunished because Americans are not allowed to use any of their communications, any of their news sources to talk about anything other than a guy that's been dead for 17 years going out with a 17-year-old 20 years ago. Think about that. It's about prioritization. It's not about it's okay. It's about prioritization. And every single podcaster right now, and I think the podcasters are among the worst. They are the worst of them all, who's currently making noise and taking money and making programs and knows that this is happening, are among the worst traitors and enemies of the United States of America. They really should be punished physically for doing what they're doing. But getting back to the Epstein part, if you knew that you wanted a way for the ruling class, if you will, to get out of 1 million or so additional unnecessary deaths or deaths that were caused during COVID, all you need to do is plead guilty to something. If Jeffrey Epstein pleads guilty once to one action with an underage person, and that person is also working perhaps with the FBI to set it all up, that means that he didn't even need to do anything. You create the suspicion, and then it's off to the races. And if that particular scenario upsets you, well, once again, if someone is upset about children being impacted, then they have to admit that making Epstein the priority now is exactly what is going to enable the problem to continue. It's a trap. Whose side Epstein? I don't really understand Epstein as far as a personality goes, but I can see how he was used. He went to the Dalton School. If he went to the Dalton School and he was hired by the father of Bill Barr, Donald Barr, well, then that means that he's somehow in the Barr family. And knowing that the uncle of Donald Barr was Alexander Sachs. Alexander Sachs was the man that handed the Einstein-Szilard letter to FDR to start the Manhattan Project. The entire Atomic Energy Commission, all of it came out of that. All of it came out of that. He was the vice president for years at Lehman Brothers. He was at Goldman Sachs. He was the initial economic advisor to the FDR's New Deal. This is all the uncle, the great uncle of Bill Barr, if you will. This is how close this is. This is the hiring family of Jeffrey Epstein. In other words, Jeffrey Epstein from day one is right in the middle of the Atomic Energy Commission. From day one, he's right in the middle of all of the scientists which are leading these commissions about taking control of the evolution of the human species. And what do they need? They need money. They need more money than governments ever could give them. If the United States got rid of every single piece of military equipment and every single soldier and took all $900 billion or whatever the hell it is a year and put it into genomics and computing, you know what? It still wouldn't be enough. They need more. There's no more that's enough. They need even more than that. So working with money managers on Wall Street gave them that type of liquidity. The value of their companies went up. They were able to hire more people. They were able to buy more real estate. They were able to buy more intellectual property. Thanks to that, whatever that Dole-Bain Act in 1980, they got free intellectual property dumped out of the colleges, the educational institutions, the United States of America. All of it just ties together. It's all about working with Wall Street. And as long as Wall Street allows, 93, 95% of the U.S. population to have a job and keep paying their mortgages and have oversized houses, even though they don't last 100 years anymore, and buy a new car every several years, as long as Americans can keep on ticking and talking and borrowing money, everyone is kind of okay. They're unhappy. They riot in the streets every once in a while, but they're okay. You push them pretty far, but they're willing to take it. And that's exactly the message. By the way, I'm going to play it for you.
Our understanding is to what that might.
I want to play that scene. It's a scene from Margin Call. Okay. So this is a scene in the car. This is one of the more senior people at this firm, which is meant to be, this is a 2011 movie starring Kevin Spacey. He's not in the scene, though. Talking about the market meltdown. The market meltdown is happening on the day that these people are in this car. So you can tell who the more senior person is in this car. And then there's a junior person in the car who's worried that he's going to get laid off, and he is going to get laid off. And the junior person is feeling bad that, the economy is going to go bad. And the movie is meant to take place in 2008, okay? Remember, this, I think, a Weinstein-connected movie.
Am I getting fired?
I don't know.
It does have a lot of F-bombs.
Yeah. Almost definitely yes.
Audio's not good, sorry.
Are you?
No. Seth, it's nothing you did. You're just in the wrong firm at the wrong time. Young guys are always the first to get culled. Listen, nothing I'm going to say is going to make you feel any better. It's just going to suck for a while, and then you'll be fine. You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
For what it's worth, I'm sorry this is happening to you.
Don't be. You didn't do it to me.
Still, at least you're going to have some nice cash to walk away with.
I guess. Shit, this is really going to affect people.
Yeah, it's going to affect people like me.
Real people.
Jesus, Seth. Listen, if you really want to do this with your life, you have to believe you're necessary, and you are. People want to live like this in their cars and their big fucking houses they can't even pay for, then you're necessary. The only reason that they all get to continue living like kings is because we got our fingers on the scales in their favor. I take my hand off when then the whole world gets really fucking fair, really fucking quickly, and nobody actually wants that. They say they do, but they don't. They want what we have to give them, but they also want to, play innocent and pretend they have no idea where it came from. Well, that's more hypocrisy than I'm willing to swallow, so fuck. Fuck normal people. The funny thing is, tomorrow if all of this goes tits up, they're gonna crucify us for being too reckless. But if we're wrong, and everything gets back on track, well then the same people are gonna laugh till they piss their pants because we're gonna look like the biggest pussies God ever let through the door.
What it's expressing is, they have a lot of money. And what the movie is meant to do is to make you think it's a bunch of just greedy business people, a bunch of greedy white people or whatever, greedy business people, just reckless, who will make a lot of money and then they spend a lot of money on their houses and they don't really care about people, which is why they take big risks. But I think that's the mythology of Wall Street. There is a lot of recklessness, but that type of recklessness is there for a reason. I think there's a reason why Wall Street is not too far away from Memorial Sloan Kettering, the United Nations, and the Rockefeller Institute. And it's not because, they all like to eat at the same sub shop. These things are all deeply connected. The home of media, the home of Vogue, all of this stuff. They have a purpose. The purpose is to make sure that the companies that are involved in evolving and providing the technology and the infrastructure that's necessary for the agenda of all agendas, that these companies get it. How else are you going to find the money to vault all of this enriched uranium? How else are you going to pour countless billions into chipsets which won't provide any return on investment for a decade or two? How else are you going to pour all this money into internet companies, many of which lose money? How else are you going to pour all this money into pharma, which loses money? And if it does make money, it's fake. How much of Wall Street right now is investing in, better ways in making an LVL beam for a house? Nobody. That's not what it's all about. That's considered boring. So they make their money, and they create all the money, which can then be loaned out and then reinvested. And it's why you have people making ridiculous, absurd salaries at all of these tech companies, computer companies, chip companies, not so much chip companies anymore, but pharma companies, genetic companies, immunology companies, etc. It all makes sense. But how is Jeffrey Epstein going to know where to spend that money? How does he know? Jeffrey Epstein is going to need someone that tells him. And there's not many people that are deep in the weeds that could. Someone like Joshua LEDERBERG could, though. Joshua LEDERBERG could very clearly articulate exactly where the billions needed to go. And this is not about Joshua LEDERBERG telling people where to put the money so they get rich. This is not about that. This is some pretty deep-seated global governance, human evolution, Freemason, if you want to call it that, stuff. This is the ruling of the world. It's not about, helping people become trillionaires. That's the mythology. The rulers, their job isn't to make sure that some people can become billionaires and trillionaires and keep their money. The people that really rule the world know that it doesn't matter how much money you have. You're either in that club or you're not. You know how much money you have? It's either a yes or a no. Really. This is about making sure the agenda is supported across the globe, regardless of the financial budgets of individual nations. Is Jeffrey Epstein the most important person in this? I suspect he isn't. There's probably, there are probably hundreds of other people that fit the profile of Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein might actually be pretty low on the ladder. He is probably just someone that knows. He's probably more social. He doesn't seem to be really good at having a long-term relationship. He's a bit of a playboy. He can talk to the Harvey Weinsteins. He wants to be with the Hollywood people. And there's probably other people similar to him who are, dare I say, more introverted. I mean, most guys don't want that. Whatever people say, most people they want to go home at night and they want to be with the same family and the same couch every night. Just get old and fat together. So Epstein right now is the hyper focus on Epstein is preventing anyone from seeing a much bigger picture. If you start doing compound searches of Epstein and Joshua LEDERBERG, you're not going to find much. And that's exactly why I know this is right, because you should find a lot. It should be spitting out numbers like the old casinos. You hit the lottery, you hit the jackpot, and the quarters just keep popping out until there's a mountain of quarters. You actually have to back away from the machine. That's the way it should be right now. But it's not, because it has been, I don't know what word to use, but soft-centered, soft-deleted, de-indexed. They just don't want people to see it. They want people to focus on Epstein and Trump. Epstein and Clinton. I mean, come on. Boring. Totally boring. That's not where the real meat and potatoes is. Jeffrey Epstein did not get to go to these science conferences. He wasn't a star at TED Talks, bringing in people to TED Talks because he knew that Donald Trump wanted to build another hotel. He didn't get to go there because, he was intrigued at the new style of bras at Victoria's Secrets. It's because he was getting advice from people like Minsky and Joshua LEDERBERG on where to invest trillions in the future, amongst others. And it's a great opportunity for people across the aisle, left and right, to put all of this, hyper hatred of other people based upon political ideologies and start working together like grown-ups. I really see that there's that opportunity there. I'm not interested in being, the fanboy on this group or this side or that side. I'm even hopeful that I could be seen as someone who is maybe starting, I don't want to say a movement. I don't like that word, but more people can become aware of some of these bigger agendas. And instead of being combative about it, maybe the grown-ups could get at the table and start having some conversation about it. If half the world economy or whatever it's going to be somehow connected to directly or indirectly this project, well, okay, so be it. Maybe there's a way to do that and have people live, dignified lives, respectful of each other. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. It's not necessary. I don't think that's necessary. Anyways, I know I'm dead on right here. I know it. The clues are there. The bringing up Leo Szilard, and then just thinking the Dalton School, LEDERBERG, it just all makes sense. I don't even know how much I'll be able to connect. And it does tie into the Bio 9/11 truth, but it also ties into the Bio 9/11 truth in a way that's, I think, more important. There is a little bit of a contradiction built within, and I've just lately realized this hashtag Bio 9/11 truth. The suggestion that 9/11 is a biological terror event is but what I was really going for was not only do you need to understand that there's the big concern was meant to be a biological terror event, but it also ties into something that is a continuous effort. 9/11 is viewed as, there was a terrorist event because they wanted to get more surveillance, or somebody had a stock trade, or it's because Israel wanted this, or whatever. It's viewed as a one-time thing. It actually was one event, which was on a timeline which started 50, 60 years before then, and is still ongoing. And it's going to be ongoing for, I don't know, maybe another 100 to 200 years. I have no idea. So it's really about this biological timeline. It's about the Human Genome Project. Maybe I should have said HGP 9/11 truth. Maybe that would have been more to the point. But I was hyper-focused on the fact that there was just so much talk about biological terrorism just before 9/11. No one was thinking about the other part here. So the contradiction is to suggest, it's a long timeline, but it was a single event, and I really didn't mean to do that. But tying together Joshua LEDERBERG, the Human Genome Project, this pursuit of advancing the evolution of the human species with Jeffrey Epstein, I think now you can see how the space program. Remember, the whole term exobiology, the pursuit of finding life off of Earth, that was led by Joshua LEDERBERG. That was NASA's guy going back to the 60s and early 70s. It was LEDERBERG. LEDERBERG was mentoring Carl Sagan. I suspect in the back of his mind that LEDERBERG already knew that the idea of evolution happening solely on planet Earth was kind of silly. Even from an atheist point of view. So you can view everything from the Salk vaccine to the 1918 influenza outbreak, to the use of hypodermic needles, to World War II, to whatever happened in experimental research during World War II, to the Manhattan Project, to genetics, to cancer research, to HIV, to COVID-19, to the Gulf War syndrome, to all the Hong Kong flus, to COVID-19. It's this incredible timeline, and it's not. Yeah, there's a lot of other geopolitical events sprinkled in there, but this is a long timeline, and it's going to be going on for a long time still. We're nowhere near the end of this timeline here. So maybe we can all, instead of being, the little children here, we can all start to be like grown-ups, and there can be a better, more productive conversation about how these supposed rulers, want to achieve their goals. Maybe there's a way that they could be more successful if they were more freaking open and transparent about the project, as opposed to trying to do it in secrecy and every once in a while excusing the deaths of, I don't know, 1 million or so people. SARS-1, yeah. Zika. Thank you, Zika. Zika's in there. Zika's big time in there. Yeah, I don't want to be. Well, thank you, Deb, for the comment. I don't want to, though. It's with regret I do this. I'm glad Jonathan Cooey mentioned that today. He doesn't really. He wants to educate. He wants to learn, but there are elements about what we're doing here that's not fun. It really isn't fun. First of all, it's not fun because we're talking about a lot of stuff that's true. But it needs, I know it needs to happen. I know I'm doing the right thing, and I've been able to do it so far. And what I don't get, guys, I don't know why now. Why now? Why is the big? It feels like they're taking the wraps off. They're throwing all this stuff out there earlier than they needed to. I can't quite figure that one out. What's Hello Leary? Crypto Rich YouTube channel. I don't know who that is. Talking about the threat of India. Yeah, and just to remind you, just to say it again, I don't always word it well. LEDERBERG Kate. I don't always word it well. I have no animosity towards other nations. I think all nations should be, pursuing their own greatness. They should be working hard. Rising tides lift all boats. In some ways, my frustration now with India is in many ways actually, there's a little bit of jealousy there, because I see so many American leaders having sold Americans out. So I apologize if it sounds like targeted towards India. It's really anger right now. So instead of India is going to have, it looks like, a very strong future. Instead of that happening and the U.S. working with India on this and everyone being successful, I feel as though many American leaders have just sold America out. They just said, well, I give up. And they took the money and ran. They've submitted, and it makes me so upset. That's really what it is. So is it a threat? I believe about my country like I believe about my family. as long as I have a say in it, I can work hard and participate. And if there's a failure here, it's because my family or my collective country failed. I'm more the failure, the collapse from India isn't because of India. It's because of the United States. Now, if the United States is going to lose a lot of intellectual property and political capital to a foreign country right now, I think the country that's most likely to do it is India. Is it because India is it? But that's going to happen because Americans are selling out America. It's good for India, great. But it's from Americans selling out America, and that it disgusts me right now. It's been happening a lot, and clearly there's very little appetite for anyone to be calling that out. Let's see here. And thank you guys for being here. I just want to get a couple more comments here. Johnny Vedmore has good research on Epstein, covered Nicole. I don't know who Junkerman is. There's a million names in the Epstein files. I won't understand them all. I think it's important to know enough to get the general flow. I currently suspect there are other Epstein-like figures out there. Epstein is a fun one for many because he provides all this other, salacious conspiratorial talk, which there may be some truth to it. But again, prioritization. I can't possibly believe that Epstein alone would have been enough to provide all the financial capital that this big agenda needed. There has to have been more. I just haven't really looked at it. But if you want to just look at enough, again, let's review the data points, enough to make a convincing case that that we are very close to totally nailing this. It's the Rockefeller Institute. It's Joshua LEDERBERG at the Rockefeller. Epstein confesses he's at the Rockefeller. Epstein going to Dalton School. Epstein with the Bill Barr family, Donald Barr, of course, Donald Barr, uncle, Alexander Sachs, Einstein, Szilard letter to FDR. Now you have the whole Manhattan Project coming. That Leo Szilard at Wisconsin, a mentor for some time. That was actually suggested in the Germs book that Joshua LEDERBERG worked for Szilard. And then from there, you figure out the timing. You know that the chief strategist at the first biotech company, Cetus Corporation, was Joshua LEDERBERG. You know Joshua LEDERBERG is only going to get so much money from the U.S. government. These companies, these tech companies that are participating in this agenda is not going to make money. It can't make money. And if it was going to make money, it was already going to make money naturally. So there's no money in it. So you need to create hype. How do you create hype? Hollywood. You make movies about space exploration. You make movies like Outbreak about viruses, starring Kevin Spacey. You make movies about gain-of-function viruses. And you have Harvey Weinstein and the rest of the actors make movies selling people on the threats of biological terrorism, Ebola, and AIDS, and mutating viruses, and zombies, and all these other apocalypses. And then that encourages some government money to go in there, but also every time the company does get created that provides some benefit to this, people aren't going to ask questions when stock valuations go up artificially. So Epstein plays a wonderful role in there. Sometime in 2008, it probably got out of whack. It was off balance. So what do? Subprime mortgage meltdown. The companies disappear. But all that money that went into all of these companies, it was already there. All that intellectual property was already developed. All of those salaries for 10, 20 years were already paid. You'll find the money from somewhere else, though. It'll happen. So, and that's not a sexy thing to talk about. talking about how LEDERBERG and other people on these councils worked with someone like Epstein and maybe other people to help guide money to ensure that the agenda was going to be supported. I know that's the busy work, but and with that, I think I can maintain the energy, staying focused on the Bio 9/11 truth, staying focused on the Human Genome Project, but at the same time, allowing myself to find the value necessary out of these Epstein file dumps to maintain some relevance there, because that's where I need to be looking at. If I get too far off that, it's just too toxic. So with that said, everyone, hour and 20 minutes. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I think I timed the caffeine perfectly. God bless. Stay positive. Love your neighbor. I think that's all very important at these times. Try to have empathy with as many people across the board as possible. Doesn't mean you need to be a pushover, but that's what we need right now, to be the grown-ups. We need a grown-up movement. How about that? We need a grown-up movement in the United States. Let's try to make that happen. Thank you. Good night, everyone, and God bless.